So good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's class. So we're now on to the fifth of our 7 lectures. And tonight we've got a really huge program to cover because we're covering 3 enormous topics: the wheel of life, karma, and rebirth. So I will keep an eye on the time so that we don't overshoot with the time. But before we get into the body of the talk, I just want to remind you that I set some homework last week. I asked you to play the paperclip game. And what this means was putting something in your pocket, a paperclip or something of that sort, putting a bunch of these into, let's say, the left pocket. And every time you noticed saying no to something, resisting something, transferring a paperclip from the left pocket to the right pocket. And this is just a very simple game to, first of all, bring up into awareness all of these negative, no, I won't do that thoughts that we have, and also to remind us just how often during the day we actually say no to the situation. And there are lots of ways in which we can say no. One of the ways which I come across frequently at work is the passive aggressive way of saying no. So on the left here, can you do this for me? Just ignore them. They'll go away. That's also saying no. And on the right, even more passive aggressive. I have to admit, I'm a little bit guilty of this one myself, saying, sure, no problem. But at the same time, deeply resenting the thing that you're being asked to do. And while I was preparing tonight's talk, I came across a very nice poem by the Zen master Ryokan, who was also a famous poet. And he wrote this rather beautiful haiku: showing back, showing front, maple leaves fall. And I like that image of the maple leaf fluttering down in the wind, showing its front, showing its back as it flutters. And just thinking about this saying no to life, are we showing the front and the back of ourselves, or is there something we're hiding when we say no? Is there a part of us that we won't show to the world, something that we are defending? And if so, what is it? So just have a think about that and ponder that. So we're going to move on to the first of our 3 big topics for tonight, which is karma and rebirth, and then the wheel of life. But again, just to remind ourselves what we covered last week, which was the Noble Eightfold Path. That breaks down into these 3 pillars, the 3 pillars of Buddhism: wisdom, morality, and concentration. Or in other words, seeing things as they really are, living a good life, and being present in the moment. And remember, the Eightfold Path is not a series of 8 steps that you take one after the other. These are more like 8 spokes of a wheel, which you get the tension correct for each of those spokes so that the wheel runs smoothly and runs true. Okay, so let's get on to karma. Karma represented here by this knot, which goes round and round and round without a beginning or an end. And a reminder that Buddhism came about in a society where the prevailing religion of the time was Hinduism. And the things we're going to be talking about tonight, karma and rebirth, really have their origins in the older Hindu religion. And actually, if you go back even further, pre-Hindu, to the older Vedic religion. So the concept of karma and rebirth really began in those older religions, but have become adopted into Buddhism, but with a slightly different different way of looking at things, a different prism through which we view karma and rebirth in Buddhism. So the first thing to say about karma is that this is a word which we're very familiar with in the English language, and we think we know what karma means, and we think, yes, karma, what goes around comes around. But actually, this is a misconception. We tend to think about karma as being almost some cosmic law of retribution or reward, whereby if I do something good, I get rewarded for it, and if I do something bad, I get punished for it. But it isn't actually like that at all, because there is no judge, no deity presiding over what we do in Buddhism. So this isn't any sense of judging our behavior. And in fact, what karma means is it simply means action. Karma means an intentional action which will, in time, mature and bear fruit. In other words, for every thing that we do, there is a consequence. And that's not totally difficult to understand, because, as I've said before, we're not totally separate, independent beings. We are all interrelated. We are here because of the causes and conditions that have brought us into this place. We are dependent on other people and other things and the circumstances of our time to be where we are. So it really makes very good sense that the things that we would do, our actions, will have some influence not only on ourselves in the future, but also on others around us. So karma is intentional activity, not unintentional activity. There has to be intention behind it, and that will in time mature, and there will be a consequence. And when we talk about intention, the origination of where intentional things, where volitional things come from, is from this one of the five aggregates, the samskaras, or thought processes, or mental formulations, or mental constructions. These intentions are the things that produce the karmic effects that will ultimately reap some sort of consequence at a future time. And the Buddha spoke about this in one of his sermons. This comes from the Dhammapada. It's the first two verses from the Dhammapada. He said, "All that we are is the result of what we have thought. It is founded on our thoughts. It is made up of our thoughts. If a man speaks or acts with an evil thought, pain follows him, as the wheel follows the foot of the ox that draws the carriage. If a man speaks or acts with a pure thought, happiness follows him, like a shadow that never leaves him." And I like this idea of the wheel dragging behind the foot of the ox, the idea of that heavy sense that you're dragging something hard and unpleasant behind you when you've acted with unwholesome intentions, but that lightness, that like a shadow that follows you if your intentions were harmonious and wholesome. So it's our thoughts, our mental constructions, our intentions, our volitions, which will ultimately lead to consequences. No one is judging us, but in the same way that if you plant an apple seed, you might reasonably expect an apple to grow rather than a pear. The thing that you sow determines largely the thing that will come about as a result of that. So karma is a process. There is the intention to do the thing or say the thing. There is the action itself. That's what the word karma means. And then there is a ripening process. And then finally, karma phala, the fruition, the coming about of the consequence of that intentional activity. And the Buddha said that acts do not perish even after hundreds of millions of cosmic periods. On meeting the right combination of conditions and time, they bear fruit. So in other words, what I do today, my intentional activities today, will ultimately have a consequence. It may be a very immediate consequence, or it may be a consequence much further down the stream, so you've maybe even forgotten the original thing that brought this about. And it's important to remember this is an intentional activity. So if I'm sitting up in an apple tree and I throw an apple and it hits you, that is an intentional activity. I've done something and it's hit you, it's hurt you. So there will be a consequence from that. Whereas if I'm sitting up in the apple tree minding my own business and unbeknown to me, an apple falls and knocks you on the head, that does not generate karma because it's not my intention that that happened to you. I'm going to give you a little story about my own experience with karma, which is a sad, silly story, really, and quite a sad story. I know you'll find this very hard to believe, but many years ago, I used to be a very bad-tempered, very snappy and rude junior doctor in training. And I was working in a hospital with a team of other doctors, and myself and a junior colleague fell out over something, and I actually was quite rude to this junior colleague and said something really quite hurtful to him, and we had a little argument, and then it was all over and forgotten about, and off we went about our separate businesses and indeed our separate careers. And some years later, it was about 3 years later, in fact, I ended up in another hospital, and I had the misfortune to be admitted to that hospital, and I needed a lumbar puncture, a spinal tap, and this is the needle that's used when you do a spinal tap. And who should be the person doing this lumbar puncture for me but the doctor that I had fallen out with all those years ago and had said that rude thing to. And he was super professional and came and spoke to me very nicely and explained what he was going to do. And then he said, I've only got the slightly bigger needles. I can't find any of the really nice small ones. Oh, no, I tell you, it's painful at the best of times, but this big needle going into my spinal column, and he hit a nerve, and I howled. I gripped the hand of the nurse who was holding my hand and must have left her black and blue, big tears squeezing out of my eyes. The pain was undescribable. Now, you might say ridiculous, of course, that was nothing to do with anything. In my mind, this was the karmic consequence of my bad behavior. And now I've paid the price. That's all done and dusted. So I warn you for the future, just be nice to people, because you never know. You never know when you might be on the other end of the sharp pointed object, and it's the person that you've annoyed. So karma is intentional activity that will bear fruit, either for ourselves or possibly for other people. And just as if you sow an apple seed, you would expect an apple to grow, not a pear. If you are doing good and wholesome deeds, you are probably generating good and wholesome consequences. Similarly, if you're doing harmful, unkind, unpleasant things, unkind, unwholesome consequences will ultimately accrue. So the second of our topics tonight, and these three topics are all actually interrelated, is the concept of rebirth. And this is another difficult topic for us to get our heads round, because we didn't really grow up in a tradition where rebirth is a common concept. But I just want to remind you again that Buddhism is an Eastern religion, and the concept of time in the East is rather different from how it is in the West. So in the West, we regard time as being as marching forward in a linear progression. So I come from goodness knows where, I'm born, I march forward along my life. At the end of my life, I go somewhere else, heaven, hell, limbo, or nothing at all, and that's the end of it. Whereas in the East, the tradition is that really time is cyclical, that things come to be and cease to be, and that we ourselves come to be and cease to be. And from that comes the concept of rebirth, that we ourselves can, through this karmic activity, which is producing causes and consequences, as that goes on from one life to another. Now we can think about rebirth as being life to life. And if you are in the Tibetan school of Buddhism, this is something that the very important belief for Tibetan Buddhists is that you can direct rebirth from one individual to another. So on the left here, we have the 13th Dalai Lama, and on the right, we have the 14th, the current Dalai Lama. And the idea is that the consciousness of the 13th Dalai Lama now inhabits the 14th Dalai Lama. So they're not exactly the same. It's not the same person. It's not as if the soul of the Dalai Lama has been reincarnated in the body of the next Dalai Lama. That's not it at all. But somehow the consciousness of the one has gone on to inform the life of the other. And there are lots of analogies for how this might be perceived. So you might think about this in the same way as a candle, that you light a candle from one candle, it lights the flame of another. Is this the same flame, or is it a different flame? They are the same. They're not completely the same, but they're not completely different either. Or in a more modern sense, a light bulb. So the electricity is flowing, but the old light bulb has blown, and we put another light bulb in, and the light shines again from the same source of electricity. So the light bulb is similar to the one that went before. It's not exactly the same, but nor is it completely different. It's powered by the same flow of electricity. Or the other way of looking at it is waves in an ocean. So the waves come from the ocean, and just for a brief moment, if you are this wave, you might think, I have an independent existence here. I'm living separate from all the other waves, flowing out of the ocean to the beach, crashing onto the beach. And that's then the end of my separate existence as a wave. But I go back into the greater thing, the greater consciousness from which I emerged. But just for that moment as a wave, you might think I have a separate, unique and important existence all of my own. But this is when you can see things clearly, that the wave is simply part of the ocean. You can see that is a misconception. Now, thinking about life-to-life rebirth is quite a difficult concept, and I want to be clear that not all Buddhists will agree about life-to-life rebirth. And I think it's fair to say that many schools of Buddhism are completely agnostic about it, because unlike many aspects of Buddhism that you can try out and test and experience for yourself, this particular one is rather more difficult to try out and test and experience. So, and the Buddha did say, don't take anything on blind faith. Just because I say it's so doesn't necessarily mean it is so. Test it for yourself. So you might find that this idea of life-to-life rebirth isn't particularly helpful for you. So another way of thinking about this is moment-to-moment rebirth. In other words, that change that we undergo in our lives from year to year, even from moment to moment. So looking here at this caterpillar turning into a chrysalis, turning into a butterfly, is that butterfly the same as the caterpillar? It is not quite the same, is it? But it's not entirely different either. There is certainly a continuation between the caterpillar and the butterfly, and who can say at what point one has changed into another? It's difficult to say. And at the same time, in our own lives, we can see how we too change as we go through life. And those changes can be on a macro scale, or they can be on a micro scale. So for example, here are some pictures of me. So here I am at the age of 1, sitting on my great-grandma's knee. And then here I am in the middle as an established hospital doctor. And here I am last year in lockdown, sitting on the tube, feeling a bit sorry for myself. Now, when I look at these pictures, and even the one on the right, it's only a year old, I think, who are these people? I have no idea who these people are. They're all me. I can see, yes, I was that tiny child. I was that doctor standing there having that photograph taken. That was indeed me sitting on the tube in the middle of lockdown. And yet I don't totally recognize who those people are. They were me, but also they're not, because I have changed. Obviously, I've changed from when I was 1 year old. I don't like the things now that I used to like then. At what point did I say no more teddy bears, no more dummies? I'm going to now have other things that I enjoy in life. It wasn't just an abrupt transition from that person to this person to this person. There was a continuation. And yet when I look back, they are completely different. And yet somehow something has continued through from the small child through to the person I am now. And this can even happen on a micro level. So am I even the same person I was when I woke up this morning, ready to go to work? When I went to work, I was in a different frame of mind. I was acting in a different role. I didn't feel the same. I probably wasn't in many ways the same person as I am this evening speaking to you, and not quite the same person as I will be in an hour's time when I'm cooking the dinner. So we change continually through our lives. We change from year to year. We change from moment to moment. So we can think about rebirth in this sense, and this is actually perhaps a more helpful way of thinking about rebirth, because we can experience this for ourselves, how we have changed and how we continue to change, because nothing is permanent. Everything changes. So we can see that on any level you choose to look at, from the cellular level right through to the major changes that have happened between when I was 1 year old and now. So rebirth moment to moment is something that you can all experience, you can all recognize, you can all grasp that. And this may be a more helpful way of thinking about rebirth than life to life, which is slightly more difficult to get to grips with. And just before I leave the topic of rebirth, I just want to say that rebirth is not the same as reincarnation. When we talk about rebirth in Buddhism, we're not talking at all about, yes, my past life as Cleopatra, because don't forget, in Buddhism, there is no concept of a soul. There is no concept of a separate self, an identity that could possibly be reborn in a new body and still be that same person. None of the things I'm talking about, whether it's life-to-life rebirth or moment-to-moment rebirth, suggests that my soul has gone on from this individual to that individual, and that I am the same person today as when I lived in medieval times, whatever it might be. That's a completely alien concept to Buddhism, reincarnation. Rebirth, you can think about it, as I say, life to life or moment to moment. I would suggest that moment to moment is something you can test out and experience for yourselves, and that might be more helpful for you. And now we're going to move on to an incredibly big an important topic, which is the wheel of life. And I'm going to show you a picture of the wheel of life. If you go to any temple, any Buddhist temple, particularly in the Tibetan tradition, but many other temples as well, the first thing you'll see when you come in through the front door, in the entrance porch, you'll see a big representation on the wall of the wheel of life, because it is an incredibly important symbol of Buddhist concepts, of the Buddhist pathway. And I have one of these on my bedroom wall upstairs, actually. And there's one sitting upstairs in the lecture hall of the Buddhist Society. So I'm going to talk you through the wheel of life, because it is very, very powerful, symbolically very powerful. It's very, very rich with symbolism. So the first thing to say is that the wheel is held by this monster, this demon. And this is the god Yama, who's the lord of life and death. And it's another manifestation of someone we met right at the beginning of the course, Mara, the god of temptation, who came to try and stop Siddhartha Gautama from achieving enlightenment when he sat under the Bodhi tree. And Yama is represented here by this fierce demon. He's gripping onto the wheel. He's biting into it with his teeth, looking really altogether furious. And whenever I see this picture, I'm almost, I cannot see beyond what it makes me think of, which is that moment when the hairdresser, when you've had your hair cut and the hairdresser holds up that big mirror to you to show you the back of your head, and you go, oh, very nice. And in a sense, that is exactly what's happening here. Yama is holding up to us a mirror of our whole life. This is how our lives are. And I'm going to talk you through that so we can see what I mean by that. So let's start with Yama himself, because there's some very important elements here. Let's look at his head. You'll see he has 3 eyes, and these 3 eyes represent past, present, and future. And on his headdress, he has 5 skulls, and those represent the 5 aggregates, the 5 skandhas that we talked about earlier in the course. So the body, sensations, perceptions, mental formulations, and consciousness. So I'm going to talk about the wheel in 2 different sections. So we're going to start by looking at the inner part of the wheel, and in the very, very middle part of the wheel, we will see those 3 animals that we met earlier on in the course, the cockerel, the pig, and the snake, representing ignorance, anger, and wanting. And these animals are chasing each other round and round the wheel, trying to eat each other up. And these passions or poisons, these fires, actually drive the wheel round and round and round. And you'll see on the outer rim of this central part of the wheel, you'll see some little figures. On the left, you'll see some human figures rising up from the hell realms up to a more heavenly place. And then when we get to the top, you'll see those same figures falling back down, being dragged down to an unhappy place. And this is us in our lives going round and round and round the wheel from a happy existence to a miserable existence, and round we go. So what are these realms that we're being pushed through by these 3 fires? So we're going to work our way now to the next level of the wheel and look at the 6 realms, which you can see shown around the wheel here. We'll go through these one at a time. So at the top of the wheel, we'll see the heavenly realm. So this is where we can be when our happy actions, our good actions have produced good karmic consequences, which allow us to dwell in this rather blissful state And we remain here until the effects of those karmic deeds, the karmic effects of those deeds have expired, when unfortunately we have to leave and go into a different realm. So here are the happy gods sitting here having a blissful time, enjoying themselves. And you'll see that there is a little Buddha in this part of the wheel. Moving on down to the left, we'll see this part of the wheel here. This is the realm of the fighting demons, the fighting warriors, the asuras. These are some angry people, and you can see that they're shooting bows and arrows upward to those people who are sitting up above them in the heavenly realm. And you'll see that there's a tree here. The root of the tree is sitting in the realm of the angry fighting warriors, and the fruit of the tree, the leaves with bearing fruit, is up in the heavenly realm. And this makes the asuras very angry, and they are constantly trying to battle the people in the heavenly realm to try and get some of those good things for themselves. And once again, there's another little Buddha sitting here. Moving on down from the fighting demons, you'll come to the realm of the animals. And in Buddhist, traditionally in Buddhism, animals have no say about their role in life. They have no recourse to anything. They just have to do what they're told to do, what's made to happen to them. So animals lead a very miserable existence, basically being put upon and mistreated and having to do what humans make them do, and without any way of getting out of this themselves. So the animal realm is a suffering realm. And if you like, there's a horizon in these 6 realms. The 3 areas above the horizon are slightly more harmonious places to live, and the 3 realms below are the unhappy places to live. And down here at the bottom, we have the hell realm. So you can see this is where people go when the karmic effects of what they've done require for them to be in a suffering place. And this is a very unpleasant manifestation of hell, with people being disemboweled and people being thrown in the big pot of the cauldron and all of these demons. But again, there is always a little Buddha there to help us out of these realms. The next realm, moving along back upwards now, we come to the realm of the hungry ghosts. So these are people whose necks are incredibly thin and their bellies are incredibly round. And what this means is that they can never be satisfied. So you can feed these people, but because their necks are thin, 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 and their bellies are big and round and empty, you can never satisfy them. So this is a realm where people are constantly wanting things and can never be satisfied, because you can never get enough sustenance into these people to satisfy them. And then last but not least is the realm of the humans. This is where we live as human beings, where things are reasonably harmonious without being utterly blissful, where we can hopefully see things clearly, because this is the realm from where we can be enlightened and escape the wheel of life and this constant circling through these 6 realms, through the happy states and the miserable states. So this is the human realm, and this is where we aspire to be. So this is the inner part of the wheel, and you might say, well, what's that got to do with anything? So let me just give you an example of how you might think about this within your life. So think about this morning when I woke up. The sun's shining and streaming through the window. The house is warm. I'm feeling really quite comfortable, and I'm in a heavenly realm. I feel really relaxed and very, very happy. And then suddenly I look at the time and I realize it's 8 o'clock and it's time to go to work. I don't want to go to work. I really don't want to go to work. But I have no say in the matter, because I have to go to work to earn some money, and that's my job. So like a dumb animal, I hang my head and grumpily but acceptingly I troop off and go to work. But as I'm on my way to work, I get onto the London Underground, and as usual, the tube is absolutely packed and jammed. The station is absolutely crowded. There is no way I'm going to get onto my tube because of all of these people. So what am I going to do? I'm going to fight and push and shove, and if necessary, push people out the way, because I'm now one of those angry fighting demons. I'm pushing my way to get onto the tube because I have to get to work, because my job is super important. So I'm now in the realm of the fighting demons, pushing my way onto the tube. And I get on the tube, and then look, someone gets off and leaves their seat. Yay. And I happen to be standing right there. So I'm going to sit down quick, aren't I? And now I'm sitting, I'm on the tube and I'm sitting. I'm back in that heavenly realm again. Marvelous. And then I get off the tube and I need to go and get my coffee. So I call into Cafe Nero, and oh my goodness, look at the queue. Look at the queue. Look at the time. I'm going to be late, but I want my coffee. I'm now a hungry ghost with my skinny little neck and my big fat belly, because I want that coffee and I need that coffee. I'm in a craving, wanting place. I want it, I want it, I want it. And then finally I get to work, and please let us hope I'm now finally in a human realm and I can behave myself as a human and not as an angry demon or a hungry ghost or a dumb, miserable animal. So that's a kind of an example of how we go whizzing through those 6 realms, through every moment of our lives. We are almost never in that human realm. We are almost always either wanting something or angry about something, or occasionally feeling very pleased because we finally got what we want, but it won't last. Just occasionally we can get into that human realm where finally we see things clearly and we act with wisdom. And that's really the purpose of our Buddhist practice, is to spend less time in these other realms and more time in the human realm, because that's the realm from where we can see clearly and where we can actually achieve enlightenment and awakening. Now, if you think that was complicated, wait till you get to the outer part of the wheel where it gets super complicated. The final part of the wheel, the outer part, is the 12-linked chain of dependent origination, which basically tells us that one thing leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. And it is said that when the Siddhartha Gautama was sitting under the Bodhi tree that night that he achieved enlightenment, he was thinking back from, why do we suffer? Why do we die? And he worked his way back around the 12-linked chain of dependent origination to work out what was the first cause. Why did this happen? It was because of that. Well, why did that happen? It was because of that. So let's go around this and see some of the symbolism and of this chain and how that could possibly be relevant to us in our daily lives. So there are basically 12 aspects. There are 12 little areas on the outer part of this wheel, and each one represents a particular condition and has a little image that is a representation of that. So we begin at the very top, at 12 o'clock, if you like, and this is ignorance or delusion. This is a blind man working his way along, tapping his stick on the ground and being led by someone. He can't see things clearly because of his delusion, because of his eye-biased, egocentric way of seeing things. And our delusion, our fundamental delusion, our inability to see things clearly leads to these mental formulations, these thought constructions, these volitional things that turn into karmic actions. And this is represented here by the potter who is shaping a pot, and he's making a clay pot and he's putting marks into the clay. These are the mental formulations that we start to these thought processes that we start to bring into play on the basis of our deluded, ignorant way of seeing things. And then that leads to consciousness, shown here by a monkey jumping about in a tree, which represents that consciousness which skips quickly from this to that. The consciousness, of course, is tainted by the karmic influences that have come from our deluded way of seeing things. Name and form, this is representation of some men in a boat. This is actually the five aggregates, our body and our mind and our thoughts represented here. And then the next link is the six senses. So, of course, our body, we have the eye, the ear, the nose. This leads to the six senses, the sense of seeing and hearing and smell and touch and taste. And not to forget that in Buddhism, the mind is another sense organ, and the mental thoughts are one of those six senses. Contact, so coming into contact with the thing that we have encountered through those sense organs. This is represented here by two people embracing. And from contact, we get a feeling or a sensation. This is represented here by a man with an arrow in his eye. So you can guess that this is an unpleasant sensation in this particular situation. And sensation leads to grasping. If it's a pleasant sensation, you want more of it. If it's an unpleasant sensation, it might lead to aversion. You might want less of it. You might want to push it away. Once you have craved something, once you want something, you want to grasp it. And this is represented by someone picking apples from a tree, picking fruit from a tree, grasping, or it might be aversion, pushing something away, which is the other aspect, the other side of the coin. And that leads to an action coming to be. These are two lovers embracing and having sex. So the unwise action that has resulted from this chain of events coming to be and giving rise to whatever the action or thought or spoken process might be. And then eventually everything comes to be and ceases to be. The thing itself has its energy has spent and it leads to death and decay. You can see here a man carrying a corpse on his back to the ground where the corpse is going to be left for the vultures to eat. Now, those are the little images, and that's what they represent. In traditional view of Buddhism, the two first steps on the chain of the 12-link chain, the ignorance and the mental formulations, the thought processes, take place in a past life. The next stages, consciousness through to coming to be, take place in this life, and then birth, aging, and death take place in a future life. Now, once again, you might say, well, what's that got to do with the price of fish? Well, I'm going to give you an example of where you might see how this comes into play. So we're going to go back to an example I used earlier on in the course. You remember I told the story of going for a walk in the Norfolk Broads and getting bitten by a mosquito. So this is an example of how the 12-link chain of dependent origination might work in life. So first of all, let's assume, as indeed is the case, that I am actually an ignorant person and I see things with my egocentric, eye-biased way of seeing things. And that leads me to have the thought processes that generally mosquitoes are bad things, that they cause a bite, which causes pain and inflammation and irritation. And mosquitoes are not things that I really particularly want to have around me. So that's my mental formulation, my thought process, and that's what comes through into consciousness. And then to my horror, I look down and see with my eye, that's part of my name and form, the mosquito has landed on my skin. So I see it, that's coming in through my sense organ, my eye, and I feel it through my skin. It has come into contact with me, and it's produced a sensation, a feeling. A, it's a biting sensation, which is slightly painful and unpleasant. And B, it produces in me the horror that a mosquito is on my leg and it is about to bite me. And that makes me really furious because I don't want to be bitten by the mosquito. I want rid of it. So rather than desire, I have a very strong aversion to mosquito biting me, and I want it to go away. I don't want to possess it. I want rid of it. And that leads me to the idea that I can do something about it. Coming into existence now is the thought that I'm going to kill this mosquito. I'm going to hit it, whack it, and it's going to then be squashed and dead. So I do the thing and then finally panic over, mosquito squashed, leg still sore, and I'm left still an ignorant, deluded person with my strong dislike of mosquitoes, moving on to the next part. But of course, now I also have the annoyance that I came on this stupid walk. Why did no one tell me to put on my DEET? Why did no one tell me not to wear shorts? And so it goes on, so it goes on, so it goes on. Now, how is this remotely helpful to know that we are dragging ourselves round and round and round this wheel of suffering again and again and again? Well, the reason is because we do not have to go around and around this loop mindlessly, because at this point of the wheel, between the desire or the aversion, the wanting the thing that you have grasped, that you want to take a hold of, or the not wanting the thing, you do not have to act at that point. In this situation, the craving does not need to lead to the grasping. There is a moment where you can just pause and not go on into this massive irritation about mosquitoes, the need to get rid of it, the need to slap it dead, and the need to argue with my husband who chose the walk. I don't need to do that. You know, if I have awareness of what is happening, what thought processes have driven me round to this point of the wheel, I can actually break the chain, and I can break it right here at this point, because craving does not have to lead to grasping. Wanting something does not have to lead to attachment, and that does not have to lead on to the next series of unskillful actions, bringing about another circle of misery, and so it goes on, so it goes on. So in some ways, the wheel of life can be helpful. I know some of the concepts within it are quite difficult to grasp, but we are hurtling around this wheel willy-nilly, driven by our ignorance, driven by our wanting things, driven by our not wanting things. That drives us around those 6 realms every minute of the day. That drives us to do things that are unskillful, and that compounds that delusion, that ignorant way of seeing things, and sets up more consequences for ourselves and for others in the future. But we don't have to live this way. If we are aware, then we can break the chain. We can break it here and say, no, I've recognized mosquito. I felt the painful bite, but I don't have to swat it. I then don't have to go on and have a quarrel about being on this walk. I can just carry on and do that in a more skillful, more harmonious way, going along with what is. So we've covered a lot of stuff in tonight's talk, and these are big, important topics. You can make of the rebirth what you will. Not every Buddhist will believe in life-to-life rebirth. Certainly most Buddhists will be reasonably agnostic about that, but moment to moment rebirth has some very helpful concepts in that. Now, I would just like to suggest for your homework for this week, and indeed for next week, because next week is a bank holiday, so we won't be having our class next Monday. I'm going to suggest that you might want to just ponder in your own day-to-day life, which realm am I in? So that does require a little bit of awareness, a little bit of thought about what is going on. Am I in a heavenly realm where everything is fabulous and wonderful? Am I actually protecting myself in the realm of animals because people are putting bad things on me and I don't like it, but I can't do anything about it? Am I in the craving realm, a hungry ghost wanting things? The purpose of our practice, once we have developed awareness, is to try and spend as much time as we can in the human realm where we can see things clearly, where we can act with compassion and wisdom, where we're not being driven willy-nilly by our likes and dislikes, by our needs and our fears. So I'd like you to think about that this coming week. Now I'm going to stop sharing and I will say we've got about 5 minutes for questions if anyone has any questions.
Thank you so much, Rachel, for this very interesting talk. We indeed have questions in the chat. The first two questions are actually connected, so maybe I will read them together. And the first one reads, how, as a doctor, do you rational rebirth against Western scientific knowledge and skepticism? And the second is, how does being a Buddhist affect you in your practice as a doctor?
How do I rationalize rebirth as a doctor? Well, I think you probably recognize that I'm skeptical about life-to-life rebirth. I have no immediate experience of that, nor would it be really helpful to me to even have an experience of that, because as far as I'm concerned, this is my life, this is the moment, I'm in it now, so I must really make most of that and not think about the next life. I seem to have got a funny yellow color. There we go. So rebirth for me as a doctor, I think thinking about that as a moment to moment, how we change in our life seems to me very, very obvious. I'm not the same person I was last year or even the same person I was this morning. I am reborn every moment in a different scenario, a different setting, and different reactions to things as they are. So that was that question. But of course, there are many Buddhists who do believe in life-to-life rebirth, and that's fine. But as I say, it's not by any means universally accepted concept, life-to-life rebirth. The second question was about how does being a Buddhist impact upon my being a doctor? Well, I think being a doctor or being any healthcare professional is you have to have some concept of empathy, compassion, wanting to help other people, not doing things for ourselves alone, but doing things for the benefit of others. So it actually fits very well with the idea of any of those professions, medicine, nursing, teaching, where you want to be as helpful as you can for other people. So do as much good as you can, do as little harm as you can. So it does help me to be a Buddhist and to be a doctor. It does help me a lot. I'm sure it would help many other people in their professions to bring Buddhist principles into our lives. You know, as the Dalai Lama said, don't take what you're learning from Buddhism to be a better Buddhist. Take what you've learned to be a better whatever you are. And if that means a better doctor, a better teacher, a better Christian, then that's fine. If the principles of Buddhism will help you, then use them.
Thanks very much. Do we have time for another question?
Yes.
Okay, so the next question is asking, the wheel of life seems very complicated. Would you say it is like a crossroads? We can choose the path we take in every situation and thus stop circling around.
Well, we can certainly become aware of what is going on in our lives so that we don't have to react. There is a moment between the thing happening to you and your reaction to it where you have a choice. So if someone says something unkind to you, there is a moment when you can choose, am I going to retaliate or am I going to, say something helpful? You can choose. But if you are completely unaware of what's happening inside of this inner world, if you like, if you're completely unaware of your own feelings of anger, of liking and dislike, your need to respond, your need to get rid of the unpleasant sensation, if you're completely unaware, then you will act on it. And more often than not, you'll do something unhelpful and unskillful. You'll hang on to the thing that you want to hang on to, or you'll push it away and you'll cause suffering for yourself and other people by doing that. So the point of the practice is to increase our awareness so that we know what's going on, we're aware of it, we can see it, and we have then got the space to do something about it. Because we will always suffer from pain, anger, wanting. Those things will happen, but what we don't have to do is let those emotions carry us away into further rounds of unhelpful activity. So it's impossible to say, I'm never going to want anything again, or I'm never going to be angry again. But what I don't have to do is say, I'm angry, therefore I'm going to go off into a tantrum or have some fuming, angry thoughts, which are going to linger on for the next half an hour. If you can just step in at that point and say, I can see what's happening here, but I'm just going to let it go, then you will be able to behave more skillfully. So yes, you do have a choice, but you will only have that choice if you are sufficiently aware that you can see what's happening and behave in the more skillful way rather than reacting in the unskillful way. And that requires developing that sense of awareness so that you can react with wisdom rather than with ignorance.
Thank you very much, Rachel.
Should we take one more and then we'll call it?
So the next question is asking, how would you contemplate things like the wheel of life during meditation? Any particular exercise?
Well, we're going to talk about meditation at the end of the course, and there are many different ways in which we meditate. There are many different types of meditation, and probably the first one that we will learn is how to simply still the mind and focus rather than being, as you probably know from that 15 minutes sitting in a chair, the mind is a little bit like a monkey jumping from this to this to this to this. So the first thing we need to do is be aware of that and observe those thoughts and not follow them. But once you develop the ability to concentrate, to focus on something, then yes, you can focus on an object of meditation, which might be a Buddha, it might be the concept of loving kindness, it might be the wheel of life. But you have to have that stillness through learning how to settle the mind before you can focus on anything. But certainly that comes at a later stage in your meditation training. Once you have developed the ability to focus on something, you can focus on whatever it might be. It might be a koan, it might be a mantra, it might be loving kindness, giving loving kindness out to others. It might be concepts such as the wheel of life, but you can't really jump into that at the beginning until you've calmed things down, because as we'll see when we talk about meditation, when you first look into the mind, it's like looking into a muddy pool. You can't see anything. Everything has to settle down before you can see clearly. I think we should stop now because we're a little over time. So just a reminder that next week is the bank holiday, so we won't have a class next week. The following week, we're going to go into some Mahayana principles. So we're going to talk about bodhisattvas, the parameters, the concept of emptiness. So super exciting class the week after next where we explore the Mahayana. So I look forward to seeing you all there. Good night.